The election of Kevin McCarthy as the 55th House Speaker was unlike any other in the last century. But after the contentious fight for the Speaker's gavel, and amid looming tasks like keeping the government funded, one wonders, is more drama yet to come? The Republican Party's Freedom Caucus led the initial opposition to McCarthy's speakership.
The Freedom Caucus is a group of about 40 of the most conservative, hardline, like really far-right conservatives in the House of Representatives. They make up 18% of the entire membership. They negotiated with McCarthy in order to get him enough votes to become Speaker. They were the difference makers at the end. And that really has set up this clash where they are essentially holding him hostage again at any point in the year if they feel like he goes back on any of the promises that he made. Some of the concessions that McCarthy made are membership slots on committees. They want up to almost 20% of committees to be filled with members of the Freedom Caucus. That's a big chunk on some of these committees. There are other concessions that McCarthy made. The most complex one is called the motion to vacate. And this is a long-standing ability of somebody, anyone in the rank and file, to just put a motion down and force a vote on whether or not to expel the Speaker of the House. If there's a Freedom Caucus member who's really upset with how McCarthy has handled things, they can file this motion, and they really only need about 5 or 6 allies.
Among the agreements, of the most immediate concern is the handling of the federal debt ceiling. The government is close to reaching its $31.4 trillion borrowing cap and could be at risk of defaulting unless lawmakers and the president agree to lift this limit. In an effort to buy time, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told lawmakers on January 19th that officials will alter certain federal investments to preserve the nation's credit until summer. The White House has urged Congress to pass a law to raise the borrowing cap. However, several House Republicans have said they'll only vote for such a bill if there are steep spending cuts. Democrats, particularly the Senate majority, aren't interested, saying Republicans are putting the nation in danger.
That's the trick that McCarthy has to figure out. What type of legislation does he want to pass as sort of an opening ante, as Republicans will support this in order to lift the debt ceiling by that much. At this point, it's not really clear what they're going to demand. And the Democrats have said that they're just simply not going to negotiate on this because these are old bills. A lot of this debt was rung up in the administrations of George W. Bush and Donald J. Trump, Republican presidents. While there is a looming deadline out there, there's no actual legislative device or legislative timeline sitting there for them to do anything. The way there usually are with these fiscal showdowns, it's a very vague process, but the penalties of having the Treasury go into default and not paying off the interest, not paying its bills would be a calamity. It would essentially shut down most government functions. Once we get into the summer and we know the X date, when that sort of possible default is going to hit, you're going to see Kevin McCarthy in a position that he's never been in. He's never chaired a committee. He's never really passed major legislation. If they do force a motion to vacate this summer, say McCarthy does something on the debt ceiling that conservatives don't like, he passes something with a lot of Democratic votes, they can force a vote to expel him. I think this showdown on the debt ceiling will really determine whether or not you're looking at a guy who's going to make it 2 years or 4 years as Speaker of the House, or whether this is going to be measured just in months.